Hi, everyone. Jose Palomino again with the Revenue Throughput Podcast. Our guest today is Chad Sanderson. He's managing partner at ValueSelling. ValueSelling's been in the business of training up, developing sales professionals, and they've gone even further into the whole area of just how to make more effective communication happen in your organizations with other organizations. There's some really deep stuff here that we want to pick apart with Chad as we get into what's really changing in the world of sales over the last 2 years and where it's going and how you can adapt so you can make sure you're ready for the changes and take full advantage of it so that you can create more value for your customers, more value for yourself to win-win. Listen in right now as we welcome Chad to our show. Welcome, Chad, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Well, Chad, for our audience sake, just and I know it's a broad question, but we'll try to narrow it, which is simply, who do you serve and what do you primarily do for them?
Yeah, so we work with B2B companies of all sizes in all industries, and our goal is to help them install a foundational cross-functional communication framework. So it's a consistent way of uncovering what other individuals, whether it be buyers or people internally, what they truly care about, the problems they're trying to solve, and then how we can uniquely connect our capabilities to that. It allows organizations to be more efficient, to reduce the friction in the buying process, and at the end of the day, better serve their clients as well as the business itself.
Wow. So communication, right? That's a big
word.
The whole thing, right? So there's certainly organization, for years, people have tried to work, we communicate better and so on. And selling and the art and science of selling has always been put into this like other category of communication, right? It's really because it has a payoff. You're doing it well if you're closing business. If you're not closing business, you must be a terrible communicator. It's it's just a simplistic view of it, and I'm sure it's not accurate, but it's how we as humans process things. We always want to make things simpler. So one thing we've talked about before, which is just what's changing now, right? And it seems like the last 2 years have been like obviously 2 years of incredible tumult and change on the planet, but in the area of professional selling. And so if a listener to this podcast says, well, I only got 3 people working for me as professional salesperson, I'm the professional salesperson, whatever, but something's changing. Chad, could you just elaborate on what you see, because you work with so many sales professionals, every day? What's really changing in the market? What's changing in how to do it well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so let's kind of take a step back first. So when we talk about communication, you're right. Sales communication has always been put in this other box. But if we break it down, what are we talking about? We're talking about 2 individuals or more that are trying to come to a shared vision of what is possible for one party to solve their problem and another party to have some kind of mutual gain. So while most people like to label that as sales, you're doing that all the time. You're doing that with your kids, you're doing it with your spouses, sometimes in my case with ex-spouses, but you're basically doing it with human beings. And that's kind of one of the shifts we've seen as we've kind of gone through this 2 years of COVID, and who knows what next year is going to hold, is this need for 2 things. Authenticity. People really crave that human connection since we've all been pushed into this virtual world. Even though some companies are going back to hybrid, we're still seeing a huge percentage of things being done virtually. And there's this need for human connection. So that requires a level of authenticity. It requires a level of curiosity. And most importantly, it requires consistency. So how do I consistently connect to another person? The other element of it becomes, how do I, as a salesperson, somebody who's trying to help someone solve problems, how do I help them navigate the influx of information that's out there? We all have seen the stats. We all know that people do a bunch of research online before they ever talk to a sales rep. That makes complete and total sense. You go to the universal knowledge terminal, you pump something in, you believe the results you get. But what we also are seeing is that there's so much information, and some of it is so not, let's say, on point. Some of it's a little misleading. And so now we see the sales professional, whether it be a 1-person team or a 2-person team, 3-person team, they really have to be able to help guide those buyers to decipher what they're seeing so that they really understand what is possible versus what isn't. Because it can be very easy to get caught up in hey, I read this report from this one trade association that operates out of a garage in South Atlanta. Right? They can get caught up in that and not understand that there's maybe opinions in there that aren't fully informed, or things that are just not accurate about the product or services that we're providing. So that ability to really be a knowledge Sherpa and do it in an authentic manner are things that we're seeing. And it's becoming a big challenge for sales professionals.
Right. So let's say, snap your finger, kind of like Thanos, right? We go back 5 years or whatever. And, and maybe sales was more about like, look, people are going down the funnel on their own, right? So the internet, so everybody's on the internet, everybody's picking up all this information. And when it gets down to me, I just got to make sure I do a very good job of representing what we do, how we solve their problems. So that's like very kind of a bilateral, that's it.
Yep.
But what you're suggesting now, Chad, that the world's actually another level of complexity, another layer is entered into it, which is now that customer or that prospect who's been going down the funnel is bringing a lot with them as they make their trek down the funnel.
Yep.
All this information, and they're not necessarily equipped because, let's say they're buying a particular machine, a punch press. I make the prototypical industrial piece of equipment, punch press, right?
Right.
They might buy one of those every 10 years. Right? People selling them are selling them every day or every month. Right. So the knowledge equation is inverted. So although they're gathering lots of information, it sounds like what you're saying is they're also left with a table full of information, whether it's a literal table or like a screen full of bookmarked pages. And they go, okay, wait a second. Because by the way, a punch press, an industrial, could be a $5 million purchase, right? So
sure,
it's a big deal. So what's the opportunity for a sales professional? Somebody has to make a living selling to what kind of adaptation in themselves, their behavior, do you think they need to take on to be successful in this new paradigm?
Yeah, I honestly think it really comes down to some of the things that have always been there in sales, but I think the shift is the focus is shifting a little bit, let's say, on what aspects are kind of the most critical at any given point. What we really need is we need sales professionals to be problem experts and stop selling. We're not selling anything. We're looking for problems that we can solve. And if we can solve those problems, we can uncover what the buyer believes is the problems and understand why they need to solve those. Why is it so important to them as an organization, to their company, to them as an individual? And we can connect, hey, we can help with these capabilities and we can create a shared vision of what's possible. That is a consistent type of dialogue that allows us to authentically listen and hear to what somebody else's perspective is, to connect to it in a way that nobody else can, and to come across as a true advisor. Now I hate that word because everybody's said for years, oh, you don't want to be a salesperson, you want to be a trusted advisor. Yeah, okay. The question becomes, how do you do that? And it really isn't, the answer is not in technology. If it was in technology, it would have been solved by now. It is much more of a behavioral change in terms of the way that we execute conversations, in removing friction from the buying process, making it really, truly all about the buyer. And at the same time, providing a consistent approach that your company can measure, evaluate, and evolve. And that's a very subtle balance between how do I leverage technology for scale and automation and not get rid of the human element, yet continue to evolve the conversational dynamic and behaviors behind that in a way that are going to allow me to be consistently efficient in the way I approach people, and also in uncovering what their problems are. I don't know if your audience is familiar with masterclass.com. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just happen to love their product. And if anybody's familiar with Sarah Blakely, she was the CEO and founder of Spanx. And she has this masterclass on there where she talks about selling the problem, not the solution. And I think most companies, especially when you're smaller, you're so concerned about the cash flow, you're so concerned about the financials that you default to, hey, we're really cool, you want some of this. When if we just slow down, take a beat, and we just ask the other person, hey, what problems are you trying to solve? Why do you think you need this punch press right now? What problems is that going to help you solve? And why is solving those problems so important? If we just have a conversation and we help them understand all the elements of what they know and don't know, because like you said, we're selling these day in and day out. So we're on top of this. So we need to be able to help educate them and help them make sense of it, but we have to do it consistently. And that requires some type of framework that we can rely on so that even on our bad days, we're still performing and being consistent in the way we engage with buyers.
Now that also presupposes or requires, I would think, kind of a subtle shift in personal motivation as well. And the way a lot of organizations structure sales compensation and so on doesn't really allow for a lot of an individual, I've carried a bag, right? So I know,
Yeah.
okay, you can talk to me all day about like solving problems and so on, but if the next word out of your mouth is how are we doing this week on quota on these deals and what's pipeline look like, then that's like mixed signals. And I'm saying, okay, which one keeps me employed? Which one do I lose my job? Right.
Yeah,
So I'm a simple
absolutely.
guy, right? Most people, I think operate on that, on that basis. So what kind of changes do you have to implement culturally to allow a sales professional to have the room to breathe mentally so they
Yeah.
can say, okay, I'm going to try to solve people's problems. I'm not going to just try to get them to a close. I'm going to actually get them to a relationship where they want to work with me, and therefore the close will come.
Yeah, so it's a great point, because if you think about any company, regardless of size, you onboard somebody, and what do? We tell them how awesome we are. We tell them about all the cool stuff we do, and then we unleash them on the world, and we're surprised when all they want to do is talk about us. And so the measurements that we set up, the pipeline measurements, the deal velocity, the deal size, margins, discounting, all of that stuff is for the business. It isn't for the buyer. And so one of the things that I think needs to happen is that we need to kind of find a middle ground where we're building our process from the buyer back, because there are still things the organization needs. But instead of building our approach from our process or who we are towards the buyer, would remove some of that friction. So for example, if I have pipeline accuracy is a big one for a lot of our clients. And that pipeline accuracy in most companies it's just all over the place.
It's not accurate. Right?
It's not
a mess,
accurate.
right?
It's a mess. And so what we may want is to really make sure we're incenting individuals to get into their relationships with their buyers in a consistent way that allows them to more consistently predict the evolution of these deals. That would allow the organization to understand cash flow, but it would also allow them to culturally put the onus on, have you truly uncovered what the buyer wants? That then would trickle down to potentially deal sizes or velocity or things of that nature. But finding that middle ground, pipeline accuracy is, I think, one of those places where in order to have an accurate pipeline, you have to truly have control or understand where you are with that buyer. And that needs to, define steps and how we go through it, and making sure that we're progressing in a way that's going to help both individuals get across that line. If all I'm focused on is, hey, how much money is in your pipeline right now? Then you're just incenting sales reps to run out there and go down to the salon on the corner and get them to say, hey, I'll do a demo, or I'll sign up for something.
Right.
Rather, I don't need a punch press because I'm a salon, but I'll sign up just because it helps your pipeline. And I've actually, I've seen that at companies. So I think there needs to be a slight shift on the metrics that we're really tracking that are a little bit closer to helping us understand where we truly are with the buyers.
Well, I guess it's kind of a truism, but it's like what you measure is what you get more of. To a large degree, right? So if you're measuring number of deals in the pipeline, size of the pipeline, you're going to get more deals and more size. It doesn't mean it's a better pipeline.
Right.
And to your point, it won't be accurate. And so now I'm making big business decisions based on an inflated pipeline. And sales is a career, let's face it, where it's prone to happy ears, right? And that was something a coach told me a long time ago. He says, be careful for happy ears, because we leave a meeting, and what did he think about the meeting? What did he think about the proposal? And the person and the salesperson says, well, no, I think they really liked it. And what it was is they were just polite. They were polite, and they said, oh, that's very nice, thank you very much. But then it doesn't mean that to your point, unless you know what problem it's aligned with, how do you know it's really something that's going to be a priority for the customer?
Yeah, it becomes very easy for somebody to get attached to a problem. So in our parlance, we talk about a business issue, which is a time-bound, quantifiable, top-level priority, often a KPI that people are measured on. And what happens is most people don't think about those KPIs. What they're thinking about are the problems that get in the way. So then I, as a salesperson, get attached to one of these problems, but problems don't get funded. Problems are they're things that hey, that individual's been tasked to take care of. And so what we like to say is that business issues will get funded. If I can attach to something that is a top line priority for that individual, that's going to affect the organization, affect them personally, then I have something where I can, increase urgency, demonstrate potential impact far beyond the individual I'm selling to. The challenge becomes that it can be very easy with those happy years to hear a problem that you know you can solve. And what most sales reps do is they'll either start pitching, or if they're really honest, they probably jump all the way out to calculated commission. Oh, I can solve that problem. I know how much money I'm going to make on this one. Instead of spending the time to uncover all of the potential problems that we might be able to influence, which makes the deal size larger, the customer happy, us an ability to leverage more of our capabilities. And it really is this, cultural shift of slow down to speed up.
Right. And also, the fact that you've identified a problem, even if it has a monetary impact with that problem, until you dig in, you don't know how many other problems, some of which may dwarf the one you thought was the big one, and not knowing that. And so you think you're making progress, and in reality, it's a nuisance compared to other things they have to address.
Right.
And so it's not their priority, which I love the language of business issue, right? Compelling business issue, time bound, budgeted. Love that thought that they actually have. That means senior management is behind it versus
Absolutely.
selling uphill on something that I know makes sense for you, but maybe you don't even know it makes sense for you. So that's not as good. Now, from a mindset point of view, does a salesperson have to be, and I'll use this phrase just for lack of a better one, like other centric? Like, do they have to really have a mind like, I really want to help my customers? Or does that come across as like, oh boy, that's all touchy feely, soft, fluffy, and come on, man, we're and how sales cultures can be. They can be very, very aggressive. We use football metaphors and war and all of that as a way of explaining what we feel. Is that shift easy, hard? Do you think people inside would rather be that way?
Well, so I think it's interesting because I think we're seeing a cultural shift as the demographics change in terms of sales leadership, right? As we have more millennials kind of take on more of that leadership role, we're seeing much more of a, I hesitate to use the word consensus based, because for those of us that have been around longer, that has a negative connotation, but it is much more of a, let's say, crowdsourced approach. And I believe with the focus on authenticity, I'll be the first one to admit, I'm a Gen Xer. So when I heard the word authenticity the first time, I rolled my eyes and was like, give me a break. Like, come on, you are who you are, or you should be who you are. Right. But I think what we're seeing is, as the leadership evolves a little bit, as we see much more focus on diversity and inclusion, there is a definite need for those that are selling to have a genuine belief that what they are selling can truly solve problems for someone. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be super passionate about punch presses, but what really needs to be there is some understanding that this punch press could change the direction of this business, which could impact these people's lives and livelihood. And I think there needs to be an understanding beyond just the transactional sale of the impacts of what we're doing. And if there's a genuine curiosity there, a genuine desire to find and solve problems, if you just like solving problems, I think you're going to get a lot further than just trying to push a product these days, because people don't want to be sold to. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, hey, Chad's calling me, I'm getting a sales call again. Nobody wants to hear that crap. What they want is somebody that's going to help them understand the world they're in and address some of the challenges that they have. That requires a little bit more authentic vulnerability and candor than I think sales has historically been kind of expected, right? There's this brush of that, used car salesman. That doesn't fly anymore. I haven't seen that work for a lot of years. It's definitely not working now with COVID. The ones that we're seeing be the most successful are the ones that are consistent and professional in their execution of approach, but are imbued with a natural curiosity to help other individuals and connect with them, and a belief that what they are selling can accomplish that.
Right. So that connection, that level of interest, that curiosity, I've always found the best sales professionals I've been around are almost like Columbo, like detectives. They're trying to figure stuff out, and not just figure out like what's the budget, how it affects me, things that might affect me, but figure out what the real issue is for my customer. And one thing, and I say it all the time when I'm in my sales process, and I believe it. So I say it with all sincerity. I say, I don't know if what I do can help you.
Right.
Right. If it can, I'll let you know how it might. If I think there's a better alternative for you, I'll let you know that too. But the best way for me to find that out, or for us to find that out, is to just talk about it. And I think if you come from a sincere place, I have found people are amazingly, immediately candid. and they tell you everything because they say, okay, well, that makes sense because it makes sense. Why wouldn't it make sense? And it's presumptuous for me to show up and say, I can definitely help increase your sales by this amount or increase your market positioning. How would I know if I haven't had the dialogue yet? It's not possible.
Exactly.
Wow. So now as we move into, what we hope will soon be a post-pandemic world, really and thoroughly, and we pray for that, right? Obviously. As we move into that, things in selling, we're doing this interview via Zoom, right? There's a whole lot of that's taking place. Do you think that will remain? Do people, or is this still the breaking bread with somebody? How important was that? Was that already becoming less important as people became a little bit more transactional, or is it more important? I mean, how do you see those interpersonal things happen? Because some of these old world industrial businesses still want to meet at the trade show. They still think that's the thing. And maybe it is. I'm just asking, what's your experience?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question, because if we go back to 2019, our business was 95% in person. We flew around. I think I had 168 or 178,000 air miles in 19. Been around the world training, all of the places, all of these offices around the globe. And then all of a sudden pandemic hits, right? And so we pivot, and we were lucky enough, we took the opportunity to redesign all of our virtual stuff, but we were curious. We weren't sure how it was going to impact the execution of what we do with clients, as well as the relationships that we build, because there's no substitute for taking your executive sponsors and champions to the Guinness Brewery tour in Dublin because you happen to be there for 2 weeks. Like, there's no replacement for that. Let's just be honest. However, what we're seeing is, I think there's a reliance on it and understanding that in virtual, you actually can combine teams that maybe would have been cost prohibitive to combine geographically prior. So we can conduct workshops and coaching sessions with a team that's on the East Coast and the EMEA simultaneously in virtual, which allows a cross-pollination that wouldn't have naturally happened unless there was an in-person event, which of course has costs and risks and things like that. Now, I do believe we've put a lot of effort in developing an approach so that we can still connect with and build authentic relationships with individuals. So I think as we move forward, we're going to see kind of a hybrid of that. I think you'll see there will be some in-person things. Events will go back to going on, and those will be important for networking reasons. But in terms of what we're doing and training organizations and installing this, I think we're going to see kind of a hybrid, because we've been able to produce as good, if not better, results in virtual than we did in person. And quite honestly, as a business owner myself, as an operation of two, there's a lot less wasted time. I'm not wasting time driving to and from the airport. I'm not dealing with the mass throngs at the airport. I'm not dealing with the hangups at a hotel or all of that. Now, there is benefit to breaking bread and building that type of relationship, but I think it's going to be a combination of the two. And I think because we're communicating through a screen so much, the need for people to amplify their authenticity is actually required by the medium. Because in order, I think it's, over 90% of all communication is nonverbal or something like that. So you have to really pay attention to, are you looking at the camera? Are you using your facial expressions? Are you changing your voice patterns? Some of these things would be easily detectable if I was sitting across the table having a drink or breaking bread. But in virtual, you kind of have to be a little bit more raw at times. That's why I hate the virtual backgrounds that people were using, because it creates cognitive drag. Like, my eyes can't focus on the person's face,
especially as half their head disappears.
So I mean, I think moving forward, there's gonna be a mix of it. I think there's gonna be a mix, and I think people are gonna need to be able to really understand the way that their communication has to change based on the medium that they're in. Am I at an event where everybody's wearing masks still and we're still trying to social distance? Am I sitting across the table from somebody at a restaurant? That's a different communication paradigm. Am I talking to somebody in a Zoom call? That's a different communication paradigm as well. And so I think the benefit to this is that it has put a spotlight on how human beings communicate, especially in the B2B space, and kind of set the bar for really becoming experts, or striving to be experts in the types of communication we have to do in order to get business done and build those relationships.
No, it's excellent. Excellent, Chad. Thank you for, first of all, just sharing some really great insights. This world is changing fast. I love your, the light you would put on some of that transition as we're going through. If somebody listening to this episode wanted to learn more about you and your business, how should they best get a hold of you, find you?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, you can't miss me. It's just in/Chad Sanderson, bald with a goatee. Can't miss me. You can also check out valueselling.com and look at our team section. You'll see my whole bio and all that stuff there. And if you're really feeling froggy, you can actually just call me 303-834-5932. I, unlike some people, will tell you, I actually answer the phone.
Wow, fantastic. That alone is worth the price of admission. No, thank you so much, Chad. Really appreciate it. And thanks again for sharing with us at the Revenue People Podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.